These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know what the Northern Lights are and how beautiful they are. It's probably one of the best things to witness with your own eyes on Earth. But I guarantee most of us only saw pictures of the Northern Lights. Well, the video I'm about to show you shows a man who is standing directly underneath the Northern Lights, and this might be the best thing you will ever see in your entire life. This might be the closest any person on Earth has ever gotten to the Northern Lights, and this person was directly underneath them. Here's the video. So yeah, what do you think about this video? If there's one thing I took away from it, it's that I definitely have to visit the Northern Lights soon, because they are absolutely insane. This is what would happen if all the oceans on Earth froze. Okay, so if half of the Earth was completely covered in ice, the Earth would reflect an insane amount of sunlight which would disrupt the water cycle. And Earth would become as dry as the South Pole and even as dry as some parts of the Sahara. Next up, the ocean's freezing would most likely result in mass extinctions for many species. And without fish, seafood would no longer be a reliable source of diet. Next up, the oceans, specifically the phytoplanktons, produce 50 to 85% of all oxygen in Earth's atmosphere, which would result in billions of animals and people suffocating. But if you manage to get extremely lucky and survive all of this, eventually oxygen levels will go back to normal. But sadly, our planet Earth would never be the same. Also, just imagine this actually happened, and you can literally just walk across the oceans to Europe and any other country you want. Hypothetically speaking, of course. But nonetheless, this is extremely interesting, and we should all hope this never happens.
I was kidnapped and killed by the FedEx delivery guy when I was only 7 years old. My name is Athena Strand, and I'm a 7-year-old girl living in Paradise, United States. On November 30th, 2022, I found myself alone with my stepmother at my father's house because my parents are separated. I had an argument with her, so out of frustration, I decided to leave the house. When I stood in the driveway in front of my house, a FedEx truck suddenly stopped in front of our house. A 31-year-old man, Tanner Horner, got out to deliver a package. However, he didn't approach our house. Instead, he came towards me. He grabbed me and pulled me into his truck. Unfortunately, I couldn't resist. After my stepmother searched for me for an hour without success, she decided to call the police. A large-scale police search began, but it was in vain. My body was found 10 kilometers away from my home. I was brutally strangled by Tanner Horner, and I did not survive. Tanner pleaded guilty in court, but the sentencing is still pending. What kind of punishment does he deserve?
I lived for 15 years with a lone tapeworm in my brain after eating sushi. My name is Wong, and I am 28 years old. My story began in 2004 when I contracted a parasitic infection from regularly consuming sushi. For years, doctors struggled to identify the cause of my health problems, marked by repeated vomiting, mysterious numbness on the left side of my body, and muscle weakness. In 2007, I was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, and despite treatments, my health continued to deteriorate. I had to leave my job due to recurrent epileptic seizures and fainting spells. For a decade, my family and I sought answers from specialists across the country. It wasn't until 2018 that doctors discovered I had a tapeworm lodged in my brain. The parasite was in a risky area for surgery, so I was advised to undergo non-surgical treatment. However, the tapeworm continued to grow, and emergency surgery became necessary. During the nearly 2-hour operation, doctors found it to be a schistosoma mansoni, a flatworm parasite typically found in the intestines of cats and dogs, but rarely in humans. Dr. Gu Yuming, deputy director of the Guangdong Brain Hospital, emphasized the importance of completely removing the parasite to prevent regrowth. Today, I am relieved and grateful. I am grateful that doctors successfully removed the lone tapeworm from my brain.
Is one of the world's largest ever kidnappings. On the 26th of September in 2014, 43 Mexican students completely vanished. They disappeared from a teacher's college after being forcibly abducted in Iguala, Mexico. The college was a left-wing all-male school which was closely involved with student activism. The students regularly took part in protests. The day that they vanished, 100 students had travelled to the nearby town. They were intending to hijack some buses to protest in nearby Mexico City. Apparently this was quite common to do, and they were protesting against discriminatory hiring practices for teachers. On the 26th of September at around 6 p.m, the 100 students headed to the town. They commandeered some of the buses, and at 9 p.m. they tried to drive out of the city. However, they were blocked off by the local police. Some students managed to escape, but shockingly the police opened fire on these buses. Students tried to fight back by throwing rocks at them. Police also mistakenly fired shots at a bus which was carrying a local football team. They ended up killing 2 people on that bus. A woman in a nearby taxi was also killed by a stray bullet. 3 students were also killed in the gunfire. The body of a third was found the next morning. By the looks of his body, he'd been violently tortured. 43 of the students were reported missing after the clash. Eyewitnesses saw groups of the students being rounded up and put into vehicles by police. After they were driven off, nobody would hear from the 43 students ever again. There are loads of different theories about what happened to these missing students. If you're interested in hearing more, I've posted a full YouTube video about it. Imagine finding out your dad was an escaped murderer using a false identity. In 1967, a killer escaped. William Arnold was a young man who had killed his parents when he was a teenager and had been placed behind bars. However, he managed to escape from his prison in Nebraska, and for decades, nobody heard from him. Recently, a DNA test has uncovered the truth about what happened to the escaped killer. In 1958, William got into an argument with his parents. They wouldn't let him use their car to take his girlfriend to the cinema, so he shot them to death. Shockingly, he then buried them in the garden and still had the time to take his girlfriend to the drive-in cinema. He managed to hide the truth for a while, telling family and friends that his parents were on a trip. However, weeks later, he ended up confessing and being sentenced to life in prison, aged just 17. While in prison, William and his friend hatched an escape plan. They managed to break free in 1967, and no one ever heard from William again. Police later discovered he changed his name to John Damon and started a whole new life. He met a woman, married her, and helped to look after her 4 children. They then later divorced, and he moved to Australia. He remarried and actually had children of his own. He passed away in 2010, and everyone remembered John Damon as such a great dad. But in 2022, the truth came out. Investigators had been working behind the scenes to figure out what happened to William Arnold, and eventually they told his family the truth. Speaking to a news station, William's son said this: "Although it's shocking to know that his life began with a terrible crime, his legacy is so much more than that. I want him to be remembered for being a good father, a provider to us, and instilling in me a passion for music and a drive to always be the best person I can be." Have you ever had a bad gut feeling about your neighbour? Nate Kibbe always seemed a little bit odd to his neighbours. He lived in a trailer in New Hampshire and always seemed very private. Little did locals know that this was because he was hiding a hideous secret. During his school years, he was considered aggressive and cruel. As an adult, his behaviour got worse. He got in trouble for grabbing a 16-year-old off a school bus and also providing false information while trying to buy a weapon. He was argumentative, and locals say that he was someone you would just try and avoid. In 2014, he was arrested after an incident where he followed a woman home and pushed her to the ground. Neighbours would often hear him shouting at his long-term girlfriend, Angel. In October 2013, 14-year-old schoolgirl Abby Hernandez disappeared just a few days before her 15th birthday. She'd been walking home from school and seemingly vanished. Nate had stopped by the side of her and offered her a lift. She actually got in the car due to having blisters on her feet, and he then threatened her with a gun. He put a jacket round her head, broke her phone, and tasered her when she tried to get free. When back at his home, he tied her up, taped over her eyes, and forced her into a motorbike helmet before SAing her. For 9 agonising months, she was held hostage. He put a shock collar around her neck and kept her in a shipping container. Now, Abby is a very bright girl, so she tried to gain his trust. She said she went along with everything that he asked. This started working, and eventually he gave her a little bit of freedom. He allowed her to read a book, and she noticed inside was his name. In July 2014, Nate discovered that he was potentially in trouble with the police. He'd paid an S worker with fake money, and she had reported him. Anxious that police were going to raid his property, he let Abby go under the condition that she didn't tell anyone. After the 9-month ordeal, she was finally free to walk home. She obviously told police straight away what had happened. They raided his trailer and arrested him. He's serving a sentence of 45 to 90 years, and Abby has actually forgiven him. She helped with the creation of a film about her kidnapping called Girl in the Shed. This boy killed his neighbour for TikTok fame and got away with it. When he was 16, Zachary Latham's mum passed away and he went to live with his grandparents. He'd been known to cause trouble and had several assaults on his record, and when he moved areas, this didn't change. He posted regularly on his TikTok about his love for cars, but he started to make enemies in his new area due to his reckless driving. William Durham, a 51-year-old corrections officer, was Zachary's neighbour. He lived with his wife and 2 sons next door. Due to Zachary's behaviour, tensions grew between the Durham family and the Lathams. In April 2020, Zachary got into a confrontation with William's wife, Catherine. She confronted him about his reckless driving, and Zachary filmed the exchange for TikTok. He mocked the woman, calling her a Karen, and the video got over 3 million views. Shockingly, Zachary's followers were actually encouraging his behaviour. They were egging him on to slash her tyres and cause even more trouble. The Durhams had a 21-year-old son called William Jr. When he found out about the video that had been posted online, he confronted Zachary too. However, during that exchange, Zachary threatened him with a knife. The Durhams tried to get police involved, but they just weren't interested. Shortly after this, Zachary intentionally swerved his vehicle, narrowly missing the youngest Durham son. That day, the entire family decided to confront Zachary and put a stop to his behaviour once and for all. That day, Zachary and Catherine got into an altercation in which Zachary hit her in the face and pushed her. The entire Durham family then went round to Zachary's house to confront him. Zachary armed himself with a stun gun and 2 knives. Zachary's wife recorded, presumably for TikTok, as the drama unfolded. A huge brawl erupted and Zachary stabbed William and attempted to stab one of his sons. During the struggle, Zachary took a blow to the head and was concussed. Witnesses reported seeing blood absolutely everywhere. Police attended the scene and sadly, William Durham had passed away. Shockingly, during Zachary's trial this year, he was found not guilty. His defense team stated that he'd acted in self-defense.
It's all over for P. Diddy because he's allegedly one of the worst sexual predators in the history of music. So P. Diddy is a very, very famous rapper, music label owner, and he's been credited with finding and helping discover a lot of young and budding artists. But on November 16th of this year, one of his exes named Cassie accused him of sex trafficking, rape, and domestic violence. This woman basically stated that P. Diddy had repeatedly assaulted her for years during their on and off again relationship, and she even stated that at one point he had allegedly broken into her house and assaulted her after breaking in. But just a short time after this was made public, P. Diddy settled the lawsuit with Cassie and basically stated he wished her well. But then days after settling this lawsuit, another woman came forward and filed a SA complaint against him. This woman claimed that P. Diddy had drugged and raped her while she was a college student in the year 1991. Of course, P. Diddy denied this claim, but the story gets worse and worse. On the same day that the second woman came forward claiming that P. Diddy had assaulted her, a third woman came forward. This time, she stated that P. Diddy and his friend Aaron Hall had taken turns raping her and a friend 30 years ago. Then, 2 days ago, some of the most disturbing allegations against P. Diddy surfaced. This woman, who's going by Jane Doe, stated that when she was 17, she was approached at a lounge in Michigan by P. Diddy and the former president of Bad Boy Entertainment, Harvey Peer, and she was then convinced by these men to take a private jet to a recording studio in New York City. This woman claims, though, once she got to the recording studio, she was given substances and she was viciously gang raped by P. Diddy, Harvey, and a third assailant who remains unnamed. Now, for his part, P. Diddy has denied all these allegations, said that these are people just trying to ruin his reputation, basically take his money. But I will state here that for years, people have been talking about some of these strange things that P. Diddy has been seen on video doing with people he hangs around with. And there have been rumors that P. Diddy has been a rapist for a very, very long time. So I'm sure that there are going to be more allegations, but yeah, I think for now, P. Diddy is definitely done for.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look at that.
This is the Yellowstone accident, one of the worst ways somebody has ever died. Yellowstone is a very popular park and has a lot of visitors, and accidents are extremely rare. But occasionally, some people will ignore the impact Mother Nature has and step off the designated trails and boardwalks to explore further. This was the case with Colin and Sable Scott. They disregarded many signs warning them to stay on the boardwalk and warning them that they were entering a thermal zone. However, thinking that they knew better, they ignored the warnings and looked for a place to swim. After walking several hundred yards off the trail, Sable and Colin found a small pool of water, around 6 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 10 feet deep. Sable was recording the natural beauty of the area with her brother in frame. Colin kneeled down next to the pool of water in order to check the temperature. But as he reached down to check, Colin lost his footing and fell into the water. And immediately Sable realized that they made a huge mistake. As soon as Colin hit the water, he let out a piercing scream. Sable, who was still recording, ran over to her brother in order to try and rescue him. However, it was to no avail. As her brother was boiling alive, Sable ran off to try and find help and found a park ranger. When they got back to the pool, Colin was already dead and floating face down. Park rangers attempted to recover Colin's body, but a thunderstorm arrived and forced them to retreat for the night. Returning the next day, they found that nothing of Colin's body remained besides his flip-flops and wallet. He had completely dissolved in the red-hot acidic water. Upon the investigation of Colin's death, Yellowstone officials asked for Sable's phone in order to get a copy of the video of Colin's death. Sable gave them permission to take her phone and get a copy of the video, and when they gave the phone back to Sable, Yellowstone officials stated to her that she should not watch the video and even asked her if they wanted them to delete it for her. However, she said no and that she wanted to keep the footage. She said she would never watch it but wanted to keep it, and nobody knows why. It's very unlikely this footage will ever be made public, and can you imagine falling into a boiling acidic body of water and just floating there, burning and dissolving away, all while there is nothing anybody can do to save you? For all we know, Colin could have been alive for some time before dying, but nobody knows because his body dissolved away, and there was no autopsy. Luckily, the video of this never surfaced because I could only imagine seeing the pain he was feeling and the regret his sister was feeling. There's no point to go looking for it because you literally won't find it. There's a lot of bad ways to die, but this has to be up there with the worst. This woman killed her husband and then cooked and fed his body to his kids. On February 29, 2000, in the town of Aberdeen, New South Wales, Catherine Knight murdered her partner John Price. Before the murder, Knight and Price had a relationship marked by domestic violence. Price had taken out a restraining order against Knight, but he later allowed her back into his life. The details of this crime are extremely disturbing, and I'm about to explain it to you right now. In February 2000, a series of assaults on Price culminated with Catherine Knight stabbing him in the chest. Finally fed up, he kicked her out of the house, and on February 28th, John Price stopped at the court on his way to work and took out a restraining order in an attempt to keep her away from both himself and his children. That afternoon, Price told his co-workers that if he did not come to work the next day, it would be because Knight had murdered him. Despite their pleas that Price should not return home, he stated that he was afraid Knight would kill his children if he did not. At 6 a.m. the next day, a neighbor became worried when Price's car was still in the driveway. And when he did not arrive at work, his employer sent a worker to see what was wrong. Both the neighbor and the worker tried knocking on Price's bedroom window to wake him, but they alerted police after noticing blood on the front door. Breaking down the back door, police found Price's body with Knight completely passed out from taking a large number of pills. She had stabbed Price with a butcher's knife while he was sleeping, and according to the blood evidence, he awoke and tried to turn the light on before attempting to escape while Catherine Knight chased him through the house. He managed to open the front door and get outside, but he either stumbled back inside or was dragged back into the hallway, where he finally died after bleeding out. Later, Catherine Knight went to the ATM and withdrew $1,000 from Price's account. Price's autopsy revealed that he had been stabbed at least 37 times in both the front and back of his body, with many of the wounds extending into vital organs. Several hours after Price died, Catherine Knight skinned him and hung the skin from a meat hook on the door to the laundry room. She then decapitated Price and cooked parts of his body, serving up the meat with baked potatoes, carrots, pumpkin, and many other things at the dinner table, along with notes beside each plate, each having the name of one of Price's children on it. Catherine Knight was preparing to serve his body parts to his children. Catherine Knight was arrested and charged with the murder of John Price. On November 8, 2001, Justice O'Keefe pointed out that the nature of the crime and Knight's lack of remorse required a severe penalty. He sentenced her to life in prison, refused to fix a non-parole period, and ordered that her papers would be marked as definitely never to be released, which is the first time this has been imposed on a woman in the Australian history. It's worth saying that photos of the crime scene and photos of the meal she cooked are on the internet, but I don't recommend looking for them. This case is just absolutely sickening, and how can someone do this to their own husband?
The death of Anthony Bourdain never sat right with me, so let's take a look into it. Anthony Bourdain was a famous American chef, an author, and a travel documentarian. And Anthony was most well known for his Travel Channel show, Anthony Bourdain No Reservations, where he traveled the world and ate some of the best food on the planet. Anthony got his education at the Culinary Institute of America, where he graduated in 1978. And in the 90s, Anthony became an executive chef at a high-end restaurant in New York City. So, needless to say, with all of this media, all the books that he had written, articles, the shows he had hosted, Anthony Bourdain was a beloved national figure. Now, obviously, with all the shows he hosted, books he wrote, media appearances he made, Anthony Bourdain was a beloved public figure. That's why it was such a shock when he took his own life while filming for a new show in France. So, June 2018, Anthony's filming this show in France, and his friend Eric notices that he's acting weird. And in between filming, Anthony missed dinner and then breakfast. That's when his friend Eric began to grow concerned. They then performed a welfare check on Anthony in his hotel room, and they discovered that he had taken his own life by hanging. Now, according to reports that were done after Anthony's death, this was allegedly an impulsive act. Now, Anthony was a very outspoken critic of the way the world was. He was a vocal advocate against sexual harassment in the entertainment industry. He frequently discussed how much he hated racism. And he was a prophet for peasant foods, as he called them, or cheap foods in foreign countries. Now, to this day, people don't know exactly why Anthony decided to take his life that day. But some people have theorized, and this is just a theory, that it had to do with his girlfriend, Asia Argento. Now, it was well known that Anthony was really invested in his relationship with Asia. But some have claimed afterwards that this relationship was mutually open. And in the weeks before Anthony's death, Asia had appeared in press photos with another man at the Cannes Film Festival. Anthony Bourdain had also become known as the Sid Vicious of the culinary world. And earlier on the day that Anthony took his own life, Asia posted a cryptic Instagram story. She was wearing a Sid Vicious shirt that said "fuck everyone" on it. And she wrote on the story, "You know who you are." About 3 hours after this story was uploaded to Asia's Instagram, it was announced that Anthony had been found dead. And she quickly then deleted the photo, and she immediately went into PR mode and claimed that the story was about Harvey Weinstein, who she was speaking out against at the time. And she then went on to claim this open relationship thing and stated that she loved Anthony and missed him so much. Now, a lot of people have come out and been very skeptical about Asia's claims. They said that the two's relationship was extremely volatile, that Anthony was deeply unhappy with the open relationship status, and that he almost felt embarrassed by her. Keep in mind, at around the same time Asia was speaking out about Harvey Weinstein, she had been accused herself of assaulting a 17-year-old boy in a hotel room. There are, once again, like I've said before, a lot of conspiracy theories regarding Anthony Bourdain's death, but if you want me to talk about those, I'll make a completely different TikTok. R.I.P. Anthony Bourdain. He truly was a culinary genius, a visionary, and he's still missed to this day.
This story has absolutely horrified me. Trigger warning for child abuse. The details are absolutely horrific. This is 3-year-old Bastien, and he was murdered by his father in an absolutely brutal way. Bastien was born on the 17th of May 2008 in France. This is his father, Christophe Champenois. He was out drinking on that day, and when he was told that he had a son, he simply shrugged and said that he didn't want one. Bastien's grandmother described him as an unwanted child. He never experienced love, he was regularly abused, and he was seen as a burden. Some of the abuse that Bastien endured was being locked in a cupboard in the pitch black for hours on end, or being sat on a windowsill all day trying not to fall off. In November 2011, Bastien had been at school, and his mother Charlene was told when she picked him up that he'd been a little bit naughty and he'd flushed another child's drawing down the toilet. He'd already been punished accordingly by his teacher, but when Christoph found out, that wasn't good enough for him. He needed to punish him too. When Bastien got home from school that day, his father stripped him naked, threw him into the washing machine, shut the door, and ran the cold cycle. The washing machine started filling with freezing cold water and spinning while Bastien screamed for his life. What's even more horrifying is that Bastien's mother was sat in the next room doing a jigsaw puzzle with her daughter, completely ignoring Bastien's screams. When the cycle finished, Christoph opened the door and pulled out a lifeless Bastien. He then turned to Charlene and said, "At least he won't bother us anymore." Christoph actually called the emergency services himself and said, "I've got a little problem, my son has fallen down the stairs." When emergency services got there, they saw that Bastien was soaking wet and he had water coming out of his nostrils and mouth. They then changed the story and told them that he drowned in the bath. However, when police spoke to Bastien's 6-year-old sister, she told them the truth and said, "Daddy put Bastien in the washing machine because he was naughty at school." Bastien died from a mixture of head injuries from being spun in the washing machine and from drowning. It soon came to light that the family were already known to social services, and the night before Bastien's murder, Christoph had messaged their social worker saying, "I'm going to throw Bastien from the 2nd floor, even if it gets me 15 years in jail." She was actually on sick leave and she didn't see the message until it was too late. Christoph was found guilty of Bastien's murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. And Bastien's mother Charlene was found guilty of aiding and abetting murder and violence and sentenced to 12 years. Killer twins. But was it self-defense or cold calculated murder? On the morning of January 13th, 2010, 16-year-old twins Jazz and Taz murdered their mother, put her in the bathtub, and then got dressed and went to school. Nikki hadn't always been present in her daughters' lives, and they'd mostly been raised by their great-grandmother Della. Della said that Nikki's presence was sporadic in her daughters' lives and that she flitted in and out when it suited her. But in 2007, when they were just 13 years old, she requested custody. They immediately clashed and the twins found their mother's attempts to control them hypocritical. Arguments soon led to physical altercations, and this led to juvenile court and counselling for Nikki and her girls. This then led to them going back to their great-grandmother's care. Nikki again requested custody and they were soon placed back with her on January 5th, 2010. Just 8 days later, Nikki was dead. On January 13th, 2010, the twins called 911 saying that they'd come home from school and found their mother dead in the bathtub. Nikki had a cut to her scalp and multiple stab wounds. It was soon discovered that the girls also had injuries, including bite marks that matched their mother's dental records. They were arrested in May 2010 and initially pleaded not guilty. However, after being offered plea deals, they both confessed.
It wasn't like it was a fight on the street. It was more of a fight to somebody die. And she trying to hit us with the pot. You know, she just threatening us and everybody yelled. Everybody's yelling. We all we mad.
I had took the pot from her. This one she had grabbed, like kind of turned like you said, get back. But she didn't keep the knife in her hand.
My mom is winning that battle with the knife or whatever. So I picked up the pot and I hit her with the pot in my chest. Like I said, I'm not that big, so when she bit me, she latched on to me, and I'm trying to get her off of me because it hurts. I'm trying to punch her, I guess, and I think Dad stabbed her. She's stunned. I think I picked up a knife and I stabbed her. They wasn't cuts like they were deep. I couldn't bring myself to do it.
You had about a hand?
Yeah, I think I was at the top.
And Jazz had her feet.
Yeah, she was heavy.
What did y'all do?
They put her in the tub.
What are you saying to her?
I'm sorry. I told her I was sorry.
I wished it didn't happen like that. I wish I could have saw something else to do.
They both pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and received 30 years in prison. Their projected release date is May 19th, 2040, when they'll be 46 years old.